Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Chat, Comment, Change. This sessions we've put aside 3 sessions of Chat, Comment, Change over the next 2 weeks to have a discussion around understanding the Student Partnership Agreement for 2020. Every year, the university and the student union come together as one to have a partnership agreement. And the partnership agreement for this year is to understand expectations around values such as equality, tolerance, and respect. Over the next 2 weeks, myself, Kieran, and Ursula, the 3 sabbatical presidents, will be discussing each and every one of these values. And I'm taking the first session today, which is on equality. With me today on this discussion is someone who I greatly admire and respect. Dr. Fiona, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Hello, Emmanuel. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Fiona Smith, and I'm a member of academic staff here at RGU. I'm the course leader for the undergraduate degree in media, and I teach critical and cultural theory relating to the media industries and media output at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Fiona. In understanding the expectations around equality, to me, equality means something really huge, something really massive, and it's a big discussion point to discuss all in one and touching on every subject. So what I've done in the past few days is try to gather different ideas, opinions, and comments around what equality means to people, what equality means to every individual within the RGU community, not just students, but also staff. And in this period, what I've done is try to break down all of these comments, feedback that we've gathered, and put them into possible discussion points to touch on different various topics. For today's session, I have 3 major discussion points that we can discuss about equality.
Okay.
So I'll just dive right into the first one, if that's okay, just so we can have probably a discussion. Just to highlight before I go on is the session, what we're trying to do with this session is to really understand. The keyword in this instance is understand the expectations around equality. It doesn't mean I'm an expert at this, or Dr. Fiona, for example, is an expert.
Dr. Fiona is not an expert in equality. No. So I can only bring my own kind of take on things and how I fit into the bigger RGU family, community, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, absolutely, fire away.
It's good to just put that out there before we go. So I'll just dive right into the first discussion point, which is something I've termed equality between staff and students as members of the RGU community. What does this mean? Just to provide a bit of a context, for example, in education in different parts of the world, learning and teaching in different parts of the world, in Europe, in Africa, is very different country by country, continent to continent. And I'm sure even international students that come from all over the world would agree with me that when they first come into the UK, it's a bit different. There's a lot of different things that we're not used to, for example. I'll give you an example. As an international student, and I'm sure you probably know this about me, Dr. Fiona, when we came in to the UK, one of my own personal experience was back home in Nigeria, for example, there's this hierarchy between staff and students. If you want to address your lecturer, you would have to use the appropriate titles, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Doctor, Professor. And we came to a system that's quite different. And, I don't know if you can touch on why probably that's not really highlighted as much in this part of the world.
Well, actually, I remember when I first met you, you had just got off the flight from Nigeria. and you looked completely stunned when you arrived at Robert Gordon University. And I don't know whether that was because of the flight and you were tired, or because it was the intense cold that day. But I thought, here is a person who needs to be welcomed in some way to this place. Yes, I know what you mean, because I've taught international students for a very long time. And all of them say this, that they're not comfortable calling me by my first name, which is Fiona. So they go to this halfway house, which is like Dr. Fiona. It's not as formal as Dr. Smith. But there are other universities in the UK that still, where this still occurs. You know, my sister works at another university and she's regarded as, you know, it's Dr. Brown rather than her first name. So I don't know that every institution in the UK adopts this informality.
Okay.
I think RGU has a culture which is not elitist. So it's not like we're passing down this great wisdom to everybody else, and you will listen to us. I think we try, at least I do in my classes, try to learn as much, or facilitate learning is how I would put it. So it's enabling an enriching experience for the students and for me, where we exchange things. So, you know, when I teach the postgraduate media industries, or for example, I don't just teach it from the Anglo perspective, but there's opportunities for Ghanaian students or Nigerian students or Chinese students or wherever people are from to talk about their own systems, and that's culturally enriching. But I think RGU focuses very much on community, and part of that is about being approachable. And I think sometimes academic titles can maybe, you know, not make you so approachable. So it's about that. What do you think? I mean, you've been in a position where you've come into the university and had to adapt to.
To be honest, I think to a very large extent that system has really worked very well. I can speak from the perspective of an international student, and I have a few friends who are UK students as well that share the same sentiments with me. You know, because it's not that sense of community that gives you, where you don't necessarily, it brings down that invisible barrier between yourself and the member of staff, between yourself and the lecturer, where you don't have to pull yourself into this position where you have to remember each person's titles and a professor or a doctor, am I wrong or am I right? You know, will I get in trouble if I say the wrong thing?
Yes.
I remember a lot of times during my course, I was able to, like, you know, set up a meeting with you just for clarification or something, or even after class. And just going back now, this is something I probably said to you before. Even my first email to you, I was like, dear Dr. Fiona, and then looking back now, when the way I address it now, that barrier is no longer there. There's understanding. I feel free to learn off of you, and that's really helped. And so I think, from my perspective, that sense of equality in that area does create a form of support to not just students, but as well as staff, because it assists the staff, the academic staff, to be able to know the student easily, because they feel more relaxed and open, you know, and feel ready to discuss in that sense. Maybe.
So it removes the barrier. I suppose it makes you more comfortable, perhaps, to approach the staff member. I mean, I suppose you need to think about qualifying that word equality in terms of the academic staff and the student roles. The roles are different, but maybe what you're getting closer to is that relationship and the communication style between both parties.
I agree. I very much agree. But sometimes I have these thoughts in my head, to be honest, where I'm like, is there really like equality between staff and students, you know? I think about it personally, and I have maybe a few examples that I can highlight. For example, the RGU innovation For example, I've come to understand that students and staff alike can both work together on the project and put things forward. Right. So in that context, there is a lot of, equality in that regard. I agree with what you're saying, and I would share the same view, and I think a lot of people would think the same, that to a very large extent, especially within the learning and teaching community, the RG community have this strong sense of community between everyone, be you a staff, be you an academic staff or non-academic staff, or is only here temporarily, So I think, would you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I hadn't thought of the accelerator program and in the innovation part of the university. That's right. So that's like an equal opportunity where staff and students get the chance to develop things, and move forward together, very often for benefiting the wider social community or the community within the university itself. So yes, that's a really great example. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I'll just quickly move into the next discussion point. Just to remind everyone watching or everyone that's tuned in at the moment that you can please leave your comments in the comment section. We'll pick them up and try to discuss about them as much as we can. The ones that we're not able to pick up will probably still be able to roll into the next session, which is on tolerance. I'm going to be taken by Kieran Matthews, who is the president for sports and physical activity. The next discussion points I'd like us to discuss about is around equality within the context of, race, gender, cultures, and the international community, for example. Are there really a sense of equality? Maybe we try as a university to create that equal opportunities, but is that really that sense of equality between these groups? What do you think?
Well, I was thinking about this. Equality covers quite a lot of different things, as you've already established, doesn't it? So, what are we talking about? Is it gender equality, racial equality? There's so many different things that we could pull apart here. But you want to talk about from an international student's perspective. I think the university welcomes international students to its courses and its campus and all the rest of it. From my personal perspective, I think the university takes racial equality extremely seriously. As far as I know, from working with colleagues and in my school, but also across the university, we try not to promote one race above another. And we ought not to be doing that. Absolutely, we should be, exercising, tolerance and making sure that everybody has a right to be heard and gets an equal say in the classroom and all the rest of it. So, we always have to continue to improve our communication with people. But from what you said earlier, you were kind of giving the impression that, it's quite a culture shock, perhaps, for some people to come across to the UK or even to Scotland itself and to try and acclimatise and work out where they are and what's expected of them and how to not get into trouble. And, even interpreting like emails, email where you get a sort of maybe an official email telling you something about a visa or something, and you're like, what's that about? What have I done? And that kind of thing. That's a kind of a system, isn't it, that you work within? And I think it's incumbent on all of us, any employee of the university, to make sure that we're all comfortable and that we've got the right information and that we spend time with people to explain these things to make sure that their anxiety levels are decreased and so on.
I completely agree with you. I agree. I think, especially, like, I'll try to first of all discuss this from a race perspective. I think I definitely believe that there's still racism out there in the world, out there in social settings, but to a very large extent, within the RGU community, it's not evident. It's not, at least from my experience. For example, though, there's still a lot of understanding, which is what we're trying to do right now around what might come off as offensive or what might not come off as offensive.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's having
Absolutely.
conversations like this that would really help. I mean, it's fantastic. For example, being an international student from Africa who can come to the UK, study, have an equal opportunity to run for elections within the student union, be a student president. It's fantastic to listen to, but I'm not the only person of color within the RGU community. There's still a lot of people have different experiences and can have maybe different feedback. But I think the most important goal is for us to all understand as one whole community what is expected of us. How are we meant to treat each other? Because and before we started this session, thinking around the partnership agreement, I raised something. My opinion was equality, tolerance, respect. They all go together. They're all the same to an extent.
They merge.
Maybe they're not, but they're very intertwined, because you can't talk about equality without bringing up, giving respect to people, respecting others, and expecting to be respected as well. So which brings me to the question that I have personally, which is around, even though there's a lot being done, for example, Student Life is doing a lot through the work of report and support, and where it's now being picked issues of hate crime, for example, not just gender-based violence, but hate crime, gender-based violence, and other kinds of behaviors that are not expected within the RGU community are now being picked. But I mean, there should be more that can be done to ensure equality between, races, gender, cultures, for example, to help everybody understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if any student has been on the receiving end of something that they think is discriminatory, discrimination, they should be reporting it. They should be reporting it to their course leader or their head of school or some other person in the university that that a support department or like specialist departments, because they shouldn't be putting up with that, or it shouldn't be causing them anxiety or distress or anything like that. So if there's anything like that, then that's what my recommendation would be, and I would hope that students would come to me if they had. If they were uncomfortable with something, and I would try and sort that out with them. It did occur to me when you were talking there that maybe intercultural workshops might be an idea, where people came together to exchange information about how they felt about certain things, about what their own cultural values are and things like that. Just having to which students and staff could come and listen. I think that might be an interesting and useful thing to do, because I mean, partly it's about education, isn't it? It's about understanding from somebody else's perspective how they're feeling. I'm actually quite careful with the examples that I use in the media industries class, because I'm hyper aware of different cultural values and people's feelings in the room. So I'm careful about, I have a duty to sort of protect my students' feelings.
I agree.
That kind of thing.
I completely agree. Why you just said that, one or two opportunities came to mind. For example, the One RGU Many Nations is like a cultural event that we do in the student union, where we celebrate different cultures and try to bring these cultures from different places to foreground, so people can see how people do things in other parts of the world. Personally, and I would use this opportunity to encourage, anyone listening to me, to encourage other people as well. Most of the times when I engage anyone in a conversation, as much as a colleague or a staff or somebody I work with, I've always tried to say to maybe someone from here, for example, have you ever traveled to Africa? Have you traveled to Asia, for example? Have you traveled to America? And the reason I say things like that is because before I even came to the UK to study, I didn't want to come. I didn't. I wanted to stay home, be with my family, go to uni in my country, and just feel comfortable within my own space. But then my family pushed me and said, look, you have to go out there and experience the world, because part of education is traveling. That's how you get to know people, meet people, experience cultures, experience food, experience music, dance, and how things are done in other places, and see reason why these things are done the way they are done.
Yes.
Then as an individual, while you're growing, you're able to then see, what I don't know how to put this, but see what you should take on and what you shouldn't. So I think there's a question that's coming in from Facebook at the moment. It says, how does the union contribute to the conversation of cultural diversity and tolerance? That's for me. Have you ever faced a situation where a conflict arose from cultural miscommunication? Yes, I would say so, yes. There's probably been one or two different scenarios like that I don't necessarily have to go into detail, especially because of time. But I've had personal scenarios where maybe someone mistook something. I remember, last semester, I love some of the videos I recorded. I could be seen wearing my traditional hat, for example, the Yoruba's hat, and people would ask me, "What's that? What's that?" I remember one time I put on my traditional attire and I was on my way to church. I couldn't get a taxi because I can't remember what happened, but I was walking, and someone said to me, why are you putting on the pajamas?" And I was like, excuse me? But in that instance, I think it's understanding a couple of things. People need to continuously be enlightened, one way or the other. I think personally I've gone beyond that point where I take offense at everything. I look at things a bit more critically now and understand that you just need to be enlightened. You need to be told. You need to be taught. You need to see things, because
the
reason why people are so close-minded is probably because they haven't seen enough. And I would say, for example, for students who have, or even staff, anybody, any member of the RGE community who is from an area, or my cultural area, for example, is don't feel like you have to back down. Don't feel like you have to fit in the normal. Don't feel like you have to do what everybody else does, because, be proud of your culture, be proud to talk about it, be proud to highlight why your culture sees things the way it sees things. Not in a disrespectful way, in a very respectful way. You're respecting the other person and saying, look, I can understand if you don't see this thing this particular way, but this is the way people from where I'm from say it. But it's also being able to find that balance, to know where to say to yourself, maybe this thing we actually do is not really right. It's an individual thing. It's a personal thing. You don't have to.
I mean, some people might have been very offended by the comment and be feeling that they ought not to have shown that side of themselves, and that's their kind of true identity. It's their cultural identity, and they might have been thinking, oh, should I have just dressed the way that Aberdonians dress, or whatever Scottish people dress? And that's not right. If you're not in the world, then the world doesn't get to see you.
Of course, definitely.
But it's a brave thing to, I think, really internalize that and to be able to live that. For some people, I think. So it depends on, I think, personality, doesn't it? Depends on what sort of character you are and how much confidence you have, and so on.
I just need to also highlight, because I just thought about it as well. It might also be the mood you're in on that day, to be honest. person could be in a very terrible mood and you say something really offensive to them, they probably won't react as calm as I did, or I wouldn't even react as calm as I did.
No, you're right. In under other circumstances, maybe we wouldn't have reacted as calmly as that. We might have said something, and then it might have escalated into an unpleasant and difficult situation. And it's a shame that you've got that anecdote. Actually, it's a shame that that sort of thing happened. I mean, it's born out of ignorance and an intolerance, and I think difference, isn't it? It's about people are fearful of difference, whether someone looks different or eats different food or talks with a different accent or whatever it is. And I think that's where intercultural exchanges are very, very fruitful and very enriching experiences, or they should be. When we understand somebody else or somebody else's culture, then that enables us not to be so fearful, or just to embrace that difference.
I think what you just said just completely answers exactly what that question said about how does the union contribute to the conversation of cultural diversity and tolerance. I mean, the fact that the union hosts the one RGU many nations, for example, or have good relationship with the international college, welcoming international students, and trying to build this sense of community to say, look, we understand that you're miles and miles away from home, but this is still home if you want to make it home. And there's nothing stopping you. You have all the opportunity to showcase your culture. If you're Nigerian, if you're a Yoruba guy or a Yoruba woman, wear your attire. Be proud of where you're from. Be proud of enlightening people. And teaching people and saying, I find a lot of pride in saying this to anyone that I engage in the conversation and say, have you ever been to Nigeria, for example? If you say no, but you say, well, I have, most of the response I get is I haven't, but I've seen it in the media. And it's not the same. Even being a media student, I understand that it's not the same.
That's a rabbit hole we could never get out of if we started talking about media construction of Africa. Because that's one of the things that we talk about, that a lot of people generalize and don't realize that Africa is made up of many, many different countries, and that Nigeria itself is made up of 36 states. And it's all generalized, isn't it? And that's where you get the stereotyping culturally and all the rest of it. And I think that's where the problems are exacerbated when you look at people. I would just it, as truth and think, oh, this, I know about this, and you're like, you so don't know about it.
I very much would. I agree. I think I would just use this as a call. I personally think RGU as a university, the RGU community is doing quite a lot to enhance equality amongst races, gender, and all different kinds of social groups. But I would still say, just like everything else, there's still a lot of room for improvement. We just need to continue to do the best that we can as a community, as a student community, as a general staff community, as a whole community, to just understand the expectations around equality, equal opportunity for all kinds of people, be it race, gender, sexual orientation, or whichever it is. It's just ensuring that there is equality for everyone at every time. That will bring me to my final discussion point, is equality within the context of disability, mental health, and inclusion. Why I tried to, discuss this apart from the previous discussion around the other groups is I feel like disability, the conversation about disability is one huge one on its own. We need to be able to identify that disabilities come in all forms, and I think the first thing I would like you to highlight is how equality is being ensured even within the classroom in terms of learning and teaching and taking into context, students with all kinds of disabilities, be it physical or learning disabilities as well.
So it's both. That's what I was going to ask. So is it people that maybe have physical challenges and they may be in wheelchairs, and that then opens up debates about access to rooms and buildings, and there are implications for timetables and personal evacuation plans, all of that kind of work that course leaders do with these specialist departments like estates and so on. But then there's also a kind of really wide range. I mean, when you're talking about mental health issues, that's like a whole thing in itself. There's a lot more pressure on everybody in society, and it's not just students that suffer from various degrees of mental health issues. I mean, staff are not immune to these things whenever there is pressure and that sort of thing. So anxiety or dyslexia, dyspraxia, some of these other forms of learning challenges. So yes, I mean, we have to be cognizant of these things and think about practical ways to help people, and to that thing about walking a mile in someone else's shoes. So try and see it from their perspective, where it probably is very difficult if you give a complex chapter of a book to somebody to read, but they've got dyslexia. It will take them much longer to read through it. Yeah. And although intellectually they're entirely capable of understanding it, so cognitively and conceptually they can understand things, it's very difficult for them to then get that out onto paper or onto Word or whatever it is. So, there are a lot of different things that academic staff have to take into consideration, but we are supported so well by specialist departments, like you mentioned, the Inclusion Centre and counselling. Yeah. Well-being and counselling department, I can't praise highly enough. I mean, any of these specialist departments are absolutely fantastic, because we have to pass on students to the specialist care that they need, because academics are not trained in psychotherapy or counselling or anything like that, but we're often the first port of call for students to come to when they're upset or they're troubled, or and things can be really, really bad. So we are ably supported, but I mean, that's obviously a service that's hugely oversubscribed and under pressure, and we need to, I think we all need to look at supporting the specialist departments and putting a lot of resource into that, because that's certainly in the last a good number of years, there have been higher numbers of students and staff with mental health issues. Very much.
Very much. I completely agree with you. I think that the university is doing quite a lot. There's a lot of resources. It's even apart from the support services, there's still like apps or resources, individual resources that individuals can use on their own. Yes. Added support, not necessarily the main support, but added support. That, for example, Silver Cloud, students use, or the other one that staff can use as well. I think it's fantastic. But I still personally, I still feel like a lot, especially in the area of taking into context, disabilities. As a community, we still need to be a bit more inclusive,
well, maybe that's because there's still quite a lot of stigma that's attached to mental health issues. Although society's opening up and there are, health campaigns that run, and the See Me campaign was one that came to my mind, so that you're not passing over somebody, that they're a person too, even, but they have other additional issues or whatever. So I think it's about opening up discussion and having dialogue continuously about these sorts of things that can help us to improve equality.
Definitely. Yeah. If there's anything I can comment, I think last year when we had the World Mental Health Day, I worked with the inclusion team and we created a video that was played in most classrooms that was to raise awareness around suicide prevention in young people and all that, and like taking into account the pressures of life and education and all that. So I think there's there's really good work that's been done, in the past, and you can't compare the topic, the discussions around mental health from 5 years ago compared to today, and I'm sure it's only going to be on the upward pedestal, for example. But I still believe personally, and as a student, I believe that we can do more, not just the university, even the union, if you look at so many of the events that we do, some even societies do, sometimes are not really, and I've been guilty of this myself. It's not just, it's everybody, and it's just trying to understand and enlighten ourselves and learn. But I think the key thing, from my perspective, I don't know about you, is just continuous discussion, opening up that discussion, feeling, and allowing people to feel more confident to open up and speak up.
Yes, and allowing them to have the opportunity, if they want to, because not everybody wants to, but if they want to disclose or to be in a safe space where they can talk about things or to raise awareness, then I think that's a very important thing. So they're heard, that they're heard, because we're all like citizens within this community, and we should have those kind of equal rights to be heard.
Yes. I agree. I think there's just one question that's come in, and we're a bit spent time, but I'll take it, and then we will try to round off the conversation. So it says, is the increase in conversation around mental health due to a higher number of mental health issues, or because there is less stigma around the subject? What do you think?
I think there's still stigma that surrounds the subject, but it's probably less than it used to be. So people are more comfortable because of different campaigns that have run. But I mean, I'm not a mental health expert, so I can't say, for sure about that. But certainly the number of people, the number of students, there are lots of reports that document steep rises in mental health issues that are being recorded for students. I mean, students have more pressure on them. They have to work. They've got their studies, they've got an anxiety about getting a job at the end of graduation. All of these sorts of things can play on the psyche, and if you're already vulnerable, I think that's very difficult set of circumstances to.
I think so too. Even though I drive a lot of campaigns around the mental health topic, I'm still not an expert in these things. But I do know that from a student perspective, I can say there's a lot more people than even those who even realize that they have mental health issues. There's still a lot more people who still need more to identifying and understanding, and that they need to seek support, or that these issues are actually there. But I believe that there's somewhat less stigma around the subject, and
it's better than it was, yes.
And it's not being discussed openly, that's the most important thing.
Exactly. It's an opening up in society, and as we know across the world, in some societies, it is not, you're not able to talk about these things.
Yes.
At all, and that makes it very, very difficult. And perhaps that's another thing where it links back to the previous discussion about international students as well. They come over from different countries with different ideas about mental health, and then they're in this place where they're able to open up, but they may not feel comfortable about opening up, and there's all of those sorts of things that go on.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of an international student, it's a completely different discussion, to be honest. But I come from a society that preaches heavily on resilience. They do understand. It's not really termed mental health per se, but it's understood that there are issues of life that would bother a person's mind, the person's thoughts, that will cause a lot of anxiety and stress on the mind. But it's heavily being promoted and preached, even within family circles, religious circles, and other social settings, that you have to continue to be resilient. And I think even coming to study in Scotland, I've come to understand that it's still a very good, strong point to try and support people to be resilient enough to move with the tide of life and roll with the punches. On this note, I would like to say it's been a fantastic discussion so far. I hope the viewers out there have learned something or been able to pick one thing or the other. I know I've learned a couple of things, and it's been very, very fantastic, and it's a huge honor to have you on this discussion, Dr. Fiona.
Thanks. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and it's been really interesting looking at some of the issues in relation to our own community. That's really important. We're all part of this same community, and I think the more that we can build that and cement these relationships and look at communication as well and how the part that plays in it, I think the better it will be.
Thank you very much again. So on this note, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who has tuned in. I can't thank you enough. I hope you've learned something, or I hope you've picked something. If you do have any more questions, opinions, feedback, which I believe that you do, there may not be enough time for us to take it today, but obviously we still have 2 more sessions coming up. Next week, Kieran Matthews is going to be discussing tolerance. And then the week after that, Ursula Ojiji is going to be discussing the values around respect. But then on this note, I say thank you very much for having us, and bye, everyone.
Bye.